Have you ever wondered why some training programs really just hit the mark while others leave learners kind of confused or unengaged? Well, the secret lies in something that many overlook: course objectives and program objectives for that matter. In this video, I'm going to reveal how mastering the art of writing clear, focused objectives can transform your training programs, ensuring that they not only meet but exceed the learner's expectations and your internal customers' expectations. Whether you're designing a new course or refining an existing one, these tips are going to be game changers for your training success. Here's what I'm going to cover in this video. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's the difference between program objectives and course objectives, and then a little bit about why course objectives are so essential to an effective training program. And then lastly, I'm going to provide 5 tips for you to write better objectives for all of your courses and learning programs. And then I'll summarize at the end. And if you end up liking the video and you find the tips valuable, I hope that you'll like that. I hope that you'll hit the like button down below and that you'll consider subscribing. Okay, let's get into it. First, let's talk about programs and the difference between a learning program and a course. Basically, a program is a combination of courses. If you're being asked to create a program, say for new engineers or new leaders or whatever the case may be, it may include a variety of courses that you package together into a program. That program may be just a few courses, like 5 courses or something, or it may be as many as 30 or 40 courses that you put into a program. So you start by defining the objectives of that program, if you have a program. So sometimes a course is just a course and it's standalone, and sometimes you're creating courses because they're part of an overarching program that you're trying to create. If you do have a program, start with the learning objectives for that program. And that means what you're trying to accomplish for that program. What are the 3 high-hitting objectives that you're trying to achieve with this overall program that you're having people complete? What specific skills do you want people to demonstrate as a direct result of completing this specific training program? So that's the program level. Once you've defined your overall program, then every course and lesson within that program will also have its own objectives as well. It's important to talk about program objectives because it's easy to get scope creep, especially for like a new employee learning program. It's really easy for a company to say, oh, and they need to know this too, and they need to know this. And when you have clearly defined objectives that both you and the internal customer, if you're in a corporate environment, or if you're a business owner, a smaller business, that you've decided that these are the 3 things I want people to get out of this program, and they're more important than anything else, then you can look at every new request and start to say, well, how does that help me achieve the program objectives? And more often than not, it doesn't. It's just that people think they have a captive audience, so they want to throw more into the salad, so to speak. Having clear objectives helps you to prevent having scope creep because you're able to gear everything towards achieving those objectives. Now let's talk about course objectives. Same theory, same philosophy. It's just at the course level. So a course objective is basically your goal of that training. It's what you want people to be able to know or do that they didn't know or do before they took the course. If you're teaching something they already know, then you're wasting their time and yours. So you want to have clear, measurable goals or objectives, goals, objectives, kind of the same thing, that define what learners should be able to achieve by the end of your specific course. Within that course, you may also have chapters. So if you're not a training professional, think of it like this. If you've read a book, which surely you've read a book at some point in your life, then you have the book and then you have chapters within the book. So the same goes with a course and lessons. You have the course and you have lessons. You have lessons are kind of the chapters within that course. So every lesson's also going to have an objective that should be directly targeted to achieving the overall course objectives. And if it's not, you have to ask yourself the question, why are we teaching this? If this is not something that's going to help accomplish these course objectives, then why are we putting it in here? So just think of things in that way. So if you don't have a goal for your training, you're just building a bunch of content and you're not solving any problems. You know, I just had a leader ask me for training content recently. And of course, the age-old question of what do you want people to, what's the purpose of this training? And more often than not, the response you get is, I want them to understand blah, blah, blah. My question is always, what problem is that going to solve? So if they understand something that they didn't understand before, first, how are you going to measure that? How do you know that I understand something? And secondly, what problem is that going to solve? Because if we're creating training, we should be doing it because we're solving a specific problem for the company, not just because somebody thinks that people need to communicate better. There's a problem that we're trying to solve. And if we don't have a problem to solve, then we're wasting time and money building the training. Hey there, I'm Mary. Thank you so much for joining today, and I hope that you enjoy this video on course objectives, and thank you so much for watching. Again, if you enjoy this video, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Don't do that until you've actually seen if it adds value for you, though. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about why course objectives are so essential. If you're a training professional, so that I have two target audiences for this video, and one is training professionals. The other is those organizations that may not have a training team, but they know maybe they're not big enough to have a training team, but they know that they need training in their organization. So here are some of the reasons why course objectives are so essential to any training that you're creating. You know, time is money, and building training takes time. And if you just kind of always remember that, and having people attend training takes time, especially if you have a lot of people attending that training. So you want to make sure that you have clear course objectives that you're trying to accomplish. Okay, first and foremost, having course objectives ensures that the training is the right solution for the performance problem. So the issue that I was talking about previously, where a leader is asking for understanding, wanting people to understand, as I drill deeper into that, you know, I might find out that the problem is that we have found as an organization that people aren't aware of what our vision is as a company. And if that's the case, we're going to put out training to make sure that they know what the vision is. Well, I would have a whole host of questions around that. What is, first of all, is this going to solve the problem? Is making people take a training on the vision going to make people follow the vision? Is that what we're trying to accomplish? That we want everybody marching in the same direction? A course on what the vision is might be one piece of the puzzle. I mean, it is important for them to know it, but I guarantee you that taking a training class on the vision isn't going to make everybody want to march and accomplish the vision of the company. It's going to take a whole lot more than that in order to accomplish that. So having the objective and having the conversation with the person requesting the training to discuss what the problem is that they're trying to solve helps them to see that this may not be the right solution, or this may just be one component of a bigger package of solutions that need to happen. As a training organization or as a training professional, my question is always to make sure that I'm solving the problem for the company, because if not, I'm an overhead department. I want to be solving problems. I know that we live in a time where all companies are looking at ways to cut costs. And so I want to make sure that whatever we're building is actually solving a problem for the organization. That increases my value as a training professional, and it helps the organization as well, which is what I'm there to do. Another reason that it's essential to have course objectives is it guides the design of the program. So of the course. As you're building your course content, everything that you're putting into the course, you're asking yourself the question of what objective does this accomplish? Or does this accomplish any of the objectives of, or oh, wait, they need to know that? Well, we didn't talk about that as an objective. So it helps to guide the design and it helps to eliminate scope creep, like I mentioned before, but this is at the course level. So by doing this, you're able to really stay focused on what needs to go into that course content. And when you have an objective, the third reason why course objectives are essential is without objectives, you can't measure success. So if I have no objectives to begin with, there's no way to know that if did my training hit the mark. The objectives are what help you to measure the success of the course. That's how you measure success of the course. It also clarifies expectations for both the instructors and the learners. As a learner, I'm able to go into this training knowing exactly what I'm supposed to get out of it and what I should be able to do after completing it. If I'm not able to do that, I now have the responsibility to either get some remediation training or to ask for help or to ask the instructor for more guidance. Objectives also provide clarity for instructors. Instructors sometimes can have difficulty not going off on their own tangents because sometimes they train lots of different courses or they teach lots of different courses. So it's easy to head off down a rabbit hole, or maybe a student asks an unrelated question in the course, and it would be easy to spend hours on that question. By having clear objectives, the instructor knows exactly what they are supposed to stay focused on for the entire training content. So that's another reason why it's important. Lastly, having clear objectives just ensures that we have focus on the content at hand, that we're not headed down to other things, that we're not just spending 4 hours talking about what we did over the weekend. We have focus and clarity on what needs to be accomplished in this training. That's maybe the most important part of the objectives. Okay, before we get to the 5 tips to write better objectives, I'd love to hear what your biggest challenge is when it comes to creating objectives or getting agreement on objectives with your internal customer. And just what is the challenge around objectives for you? What made you click on this video? Why are you struggling with it in your organization? Now let's get to the 5 tips to write better objectives. So first, you want to start every single sentence with a verb. And you should Google search Bloom's taxonomy, and it provides you a whole list of verbs depending on what you're trying to accomplish for your training session. Probably one of my biggest pet peeves are objectives that say things like understand, because honestly, I don't know how you're going to know if I understand something. How are you going to measure that? I feel like the word understand in an objective is really just lazy. It's lazy because you haven't taken the time to get more definition into that. How would you know that I understand? What is it that I would do that would tell you that I understand something? Would I verbally define it? Okay, that could be the beginning of an objective, right? Verbally defines. So make it more specific than just this broad understand. How would you know that I understand how to do something because I would actually do it, that I would be able to do something? Let's say it's a technology. Maybe you want me to write code in a particular language. Well, you don't want me to understand how to write code. You want me to write code and you want me to deploy code, so make sure that you have action verbs, because just think about how the training would be different if your objective is understand versus deploy. It's way more specific. Understanding is so vague and it's very subjective. On Joe might think I understand because I do this and this and this, and Susie may not think I understand unless I do this and this and this. So drill it down to that by using Bloom's taxonomy. So every objective should start with an action verb. There should be something specific you want me to do. It can be really hard to get your subject matter expert to think in this way. And so what it requires is for you to constantly ask questions. Like I just did in the video. How would you know I understand? What is it that I would do specifically that would tell you that I am skilled in this specific skill, that competency or skill that you want me to have? How would you know it? What would I say or do that would tell you that I'm someone that has this knowledge? How would you know that I know something? What is it that I would be able to do if I knew a certain thing? Right? So just ask those questions of them and continue to drill down and ask those questions. Course objectives tend to be a little bit higher level. And then the lesson objectives really drill down to the specifics of doing specific things, but they should tie in to those overalls. And one question I will often ask the subject matter expert that I'm working with is, if they got nothing else out of this course, what would you want them to be able to walk away and do differently? And that really kind of gets them thinking, about what do I want them to be able to do? And it really informs your building of the content based on that. Of course, you want to be specific and measurable. So when I just said the word define, for example, as an objective, if you're going to have the word define as an objective, then somewhere in your course content or as an assessment at the end of the course, you should be making sure that people can define whatever it is you wanted them to define. The same thing goes for if you want them to deploy code, or if you want them to analyze something and be able to analyze two charts and come up with a certain calculation, then you should make them do it in the course. You should have them do it, and you should do it in a way where it can be measured within the course, because that's the only way you're going to know if you're achieving the objectives, is to have some sort of assessment of some way where people actually do the task that you want them to do. If you're creating an online course and you're concerned that you can't have them do it, then maybe you can leverage something like a super trainer or a training buddy who can actually assess after they've taken the training that they can do it, and provide them some sort of a rubric where they can assess those skills. So there's lots of ways to do this, but just be very specific, because this video is on how to write objectives. If you want to hear more about how we were going to measure objectives, I'll put that in another video. But this is the writing piece. You should be considering how you're going to measure it when you're writing the objectives. If you can't figure out a way to measure it, then it's probably not the right objective. Of course, you're going to want to make sure that any course objectives are also going to be in alignment with your overall program objectives. So I talked about that at the beginning, making sure that everything lines up and serves its purpose so that you don't have scope creep. And it goes without saying that you should always be keeping the learner in mind on objectives. The purpose of objectives is, what am I, the learner, going to be able to do differently after having sat through your training? Whether it's an instructor-led training or an online training that I'm taking, why am I having to take this? What am I going to get out of it? What am I going to learn from this? And what do you expect from me as a learner as a result of taking this training? So your objectives should be targeted to the learner specifically. Now, I don't know if you have to put what the objectives are at the beginning of the course content. That's a topic for another day that we could discuss. Sometimes I think you should put it at the beginning of the training so that learners know what's expected of them. But I think it can also get very routine if you're putting that in every lesson, like here's what you're going to be able to do in this lesson, that sometimes that feels very rote, and then they start just not paying attention depending on how big your program is. So just just do what feels right for you and your organization when it comes to that. But write those objectives geared towards the learner. It's really all about the learner. Tip number 5 is to limit the number of objectives that are being used, because that can be overwhelming. If I'm taking a 20-minute course and you've got 10 objectives for me, that feels like a lot, so it should be in the context of how big of a course it is, how long the course is, how many lessons there are in the course. You're going to have your high-level objectives, and then you're going to have your lesson-level objectives. So only focus on those high level. I tend to use the idea of 3 for all programs that I'm building, because I think it's easier for my customers. It's okay if I go to 4 or even 5, depending on how big the program is. But I think it's easier for my internal customers to grasp that if I can say, what are the 3 things you want them to take away from this course if they get nothing else out of it? What are the 3 things that you want? And then we can narrow the focus. It's always a struggle for those who are not in the learning industry to want to throw everything into training, and they need to know this and they need to know this. And it's really helpful for us as learning professionals to share that more information is not necessarily good, because we can't retain it. Stuffing more information into somebody when they're already learning isn't the best idea, because we don't retain. The more information you try to shove in my head, the less I retain it. So having clear, concise, focused training and limiting that number of objectives that you're trying to achieve from each course is a much better approach for retention purposes of all of your learners. So that was tip number 5. Sorry, I forgot to say tip number 1, tip number 2, but there really were 5 there. As I wrap up this video, I just want to remind you that of all things training, I think objectives are the most important thing for anything that you're building in the training organization, whether that's a training plan, whether it's a training course, whether it's a new program, whether it's a lesson for a program, or if you're just looking at the mission of the learning organization. You should have objectives or goals of what you're trying to accomplish as an organization. I learned this early in my career, fortunately, and actually took it into my personal life. And literally everything I do is with purpose. It's with, what are my objectives in doing this? What is my goal in moving to this new location, or in taking this new job, or in creating this video right here? What's my objective in doing this? And I'm always thinking in those terms. So think about that with all of your training content, and work with that person who's requesting the training to make sure that there's a reason for the training, and that there are clear objectives or outcomes that we want to accomplish, and that you're solving a performance problem, not just creating training because it's somebody's pet project. That's when you really start to add value as part of the learning organization. Hey, I hope this video was helpful. If it was, then please give it a thumbs up, and I hope you'll subscribe. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.